Greetings, people of the internet! I am back after a small hiatus to give you an update on the current state of Insectoid Infestation. I did not get a whole lot of free time this past week, but I managed to create scriptable enemies and projectiles alongside an enemy controller. The player is now able to shoot and damage enemy ships and asteroids, and I am joyous to show you all of the progress that Insectoid Infestation has made. With that being said, let's hop into this week's DevLog. I started this week out by quickly organizing my Trello board to assist in maintaining all of the tasks that I wanted to complete for this week's video. Now that the player has the ability to maneuver around and fire projectiles, I decided this would be the perfect opportunity to begin Milestone 2.0 and set up some destructible enemies to the game. First, I scurried over to Asteroid to create a sprite sheet for a basic enemy ship. I cleaned up the default enemy sprite sheet and moved all of the basic enemies frames to a separate file. I tried to spruce up the color palette to match the one chosen for this project. However, I may need to come back to recolor this specific enemy at a later date. But with that finished, I imported the sprite sheet to the Unity project and followed the necessary steps to ensure the sprite would look perfect on screen. Not much to this step, so I updated the Trello board to reflect the success so far, and now it is time to advance towards allowing the player to actually be able to damage the enemy. I added the enemy sprite to the hierarchy and connected an animator component to control the enemy's movement animation. To ensure that everything was working, I tested to see if the animation was hooked up correctly before moving on to the next step. After a much needed refresher course on scriptable objects, I delved into allowing the enemies to be created as scriptable objects because it will make implementing multiple enemies easier in the future. For now, I am only holding information on the enemy's name, speed, and max health, as well as a component to hold the enemy's prefab. Now I am able to implement as many enemies that my heart desires. I inputted some placeholder values for the speed and max health variables, and finally created the first enemy scriptable object for this project. Next, I wanted to permit the enemy to continually move towards the bottom of the screen. Additionally, the enemy should be destroyed after leaving the screen. This was not too difficult to complete, and after a few minutes, I tested and was able to visually see that my enemy could now move. Mwahahaha! I fitted both the player ship and the enemy with a box collider 2D component. This way, I could allow triggers to be activated once the enemy collides with the player's projectiles. This will assist in damage calculations. Then, I updated the player bullet and enemy controller scripts to check for collisions between the two. I had a difficult time getting this to work as I forgot many steps to make this successfully work, but I continued to play around with different solutions to my problem. I do not know if this will make much of a difference in the future, but I went ahead and separated the player bullet script into two different scripts. One for controlling the movement and collisions, and the other being a scriptable object. This is only a temporary solution, however in my free time, I do plan on really delving into a worthwhile solution in the future. Every solution I did try ended up in depressing results. And then, suddenly, after adding a stupid rigid body 2D component to the player's projectile, it seemed that my collision detection was finally working. This was very irritating at the time, however, I am glad the issue has finally been exterminated. With the enemy finally implemented into the game, I was able to knock Milestone 2.0 off my Trello board. Now, I decided to resume my motivation and headed towards completing Milestone 2.1, which will be fairly similar to the previous milestone. Over on Asteroid, I cleaned up the default asteroid sprite sheet and dropped all of the small asteroid sprites into their own file. Changing up the original color scheme to match the current palette seemed a bit awkward at the beginning. There is a possibility that these colors may be changed in a future update. However, I enjoy the vibrant colors on the updated color scheme enough to keep them for now. Back on Unity, I imported the new asteroid sprite sheet to the project using the same settings as I have been using in this series. Then I dumped a green asteroid into the hierarchy, added a box collider 2D, and the enemy controller script so the asteroid could behave in the same manner as the latter enemy implemented. As a result, I was able to conclude milestone 2.1, and then I decided to tackle one last milestone for this video, which was to add some sort of feedback to show the player that the destructible objects are being damaged, as well as a death explosion. Finally, I transitioned back to asteroid to set up 2 explosion sprite sheets, one for the enemy and one for the small asteroids. This was a tedious step as I had to convert all of the explosion sprites to match the current palette. Overall, the sprites look fantastic. However, if anyone knows a quicker solution of replacing colors on asteroid, please feel free to inform me in the comments below or on my Discord. I followed a tutorial in order to implement the explosions to my destructible objects. So I first had to create the initial prefab for the base enemy's explosion, as well as adding the animation controller to showcase the needed frames. Additionally, I updated the enemy's scriptable object script to store the explosion's prefab. I cleaned up the enemy controller script a bit to coincide with the death animation. The script instantiates the explosion once the enemy is destroyed, and then destroys the prefab after a given amount of seconds. I tweaked the timing a bit, but I may decide to come back and play around to perfect it for the final product. I then completed the task at hand by implementing the explosion for the green asteroid as well. Next up, I wanted to create a white flash that shows the player that they have actually damaged the destructible objects. This was as easy as referencing an all-white material and enabling it after an enemy has been hit with a projectile. I did a quick test to ensure that everything was working smoothly. Once the enemy has collided with the projectile, the material switches to all white. Hooray! Then, I created a small timer for the white flash to revert to the default material after a given amount of seconds. I went into play mode to mess around with the progress, and I can confidently say that there is now some impact to hitting a destructible object. With that finally finished, I have successfully completed milestone 2.2 and was able to sign off on all of the current tasks. I have finished a lot of the core gameplay already, and I cannot wait to build the prototype of the game soon. My plan is to finish the prototype by the end of the month to allow people to playtest what I have finished so far. I might end up doing a lot of polish off screen for the prototype release, but most of my journey will continue to be logged here in the series. I hope you all have enjoyed the progress so far. If you do enjoy the content, feel free to smack that subscribe button alongside the notification bell to stay updated with the progress of my game, Insectoid Infestation. Also, Discord is the platform that I am on the most, so feel free to drop on by Stumpy's Paradise, my personal Discord server, for updates on when I go live on Twitch and/or post on YouTube. I will also be accepting suggestions for the game or content on YouTube within my server as well. Speaking of Twitch, I plan to get back into streaming this week, starting on Monday at 7 PM Central Standard Time. I apologize for not creating content here lately. I've recently moved states and really could not find the time to work on anything, but I am getting back into the swing of things, and I hope you are all excited for future content. My social media will be linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.